938 Live.
It's Body and Soul on 938 Live. Welcome into the program, everybody. I'm Daniel Martin. Thank you for joining me once more. Let me ask you this. Are saturated fats good for you? Have a think. You know, all along, you may have heard how saturated fats derived from animal products may be the bad fats that you need to cut down on, and that unsaturated fats are preferable. But could there be nutritional benefits of saturated fatty acids that you don't know about? And in fact, some categories of saturated fats are also found to have no harmful effect and are said to be beneficial to our health. We're going to understand fats on today's edition of Body and Soul. My guest on the program is visiting Singapore and is kind enough to spend some time in our studios with us. He is Professor Philippe Legrand. He is the chairman of the French Guidelines Committees for the Fatty Acid Dietary Recommendations in the Food Safety Agency, ANSES, since 1998. And if you have any questions about saturated, unsaturated fats, let's say, then what kinds it means for you, call us 669-11938. My studio hotline's open 669-11938. Professor Legrand, welcome to Singapore. Welcome to the program. Let's start off with an overview of what are fats. What are the different kinds of fats?
So there are polyunsaturated fats, which are the most active lipids for brain, for heart, and for quite high functions. And there are also monounsaturated fats, which are quite neutral, and saturated fats, which are the most produced fats in the nature from plants, microorganisms, and animals, just for fuel at the very beginning, fuel and energy for all the living cells on the earth. And so they have functions. These are saturated fats. But since 30 to 40 years, we observed and discovered in different laboratories in the world that they have also interesting functions in addition to be a fuel.
I see. Okay, so essentially fats are the fuel for the body?
The essential fats are only polyunsaturated because we need them and we cannot synthesize them. That's the definition of essential. Saturated fats are useful, we need them, but we are able to make them. And so we make them from starch, from glucose, and from alcohol also. So even if one would not want to eat saturated fats, he will synthesize them, maybe more.
There's no such thing as a zero-fat lifestyle.
And so for this reason, they are not considered essential as a vitamin like polyunsaturated.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. I understand the term essential now. It's a lot clearer. Let me ask, there's another kind of fat that we've heard about. Very quickly, I just want to touch on trans fats. That's something that's synthesized, yeah?
So trans fat is fat produced by industry when treating oils to be solid, like margarines, and so they are not good. And now that in Europe and Western diet, we cannot find them anymore. That's a good news in terms of margarines.
Yes.
And so sometimes it's still present in industry, food process, but it's decreasing. And in science, we think the problem is over.
We should hope that we'll see less and less of trans fats in our lifestyles. We want to see less and less. So that's the trans fats. So saturated, unsaturated. Let's talk a little bit more about a better understanding of saturated fatty acids then. There seems to have been, because like you said, the difference between essential versus not essential, this view that one type of fat is good and one type of fat is bad. What's that?
That's an old-fashioned point of view, because all fat is good. The only problem is which is priority, essential polyunsaturated fats, but all the others are okay in terms of functions. The nature spend a lot of energy and effort since 2 million of years to build them and to give them to plants and everywhere, and so saying good or bad is over. The question is now which saturates are okay, which could be deleterious in case of excess. That means the problem is not bad or good, but which ones and at which dose.
That's
quite different.
how much we're eating is the how much we're consuming, how much we're utilizing as well. How interesting. How much on average for the average person? How much fats do we need per se?
Okay, in terms of percent, we need between 35 and 38% of total energy. Because in terms of percent, and you should not consider as a mass, because if you say to people, eat less fat in terms of percent, they will compensate with carbohydrates.
Correct.
And so it's worse. It's worse because carbohydrate not you are not used to keep in storage, and they will be transformed into palmitic acid, the worst saturated fat.
There you go.
Because the storage could only be fat. So just try to consider the right cursor in terms of percentage of fat, and the best one is not the lowest one. Low fat is a nonsense in the diet, in the total diet, and too high fat is also a nonsense. But in France, the guidelines are around 35 to 38%
of your diet.
Of the energy of the diet,
Okay, I want to find out more about this. We'll return in just a moment on Body and Soul as we continue understanding fats. And really, if you think that saturated fats are bad, as you've just heard Professor Legrand describe, we have to do away with that and understand how our body utilizes it. Are there good versions and good categories of saturated fats that have no harmful effects on your health? We'll find out more just ahead.
It takes more than just an apple a day to keep the doctor away. Shape up with Body and Soul.
We're back with Professor Philippe Legrand. He is from the Agronomic University of Rennes in France and is also the chairman of the French Guidelines Committees for the Fatty Acid Dietary Recommendations in their Food Safety Agency, ANSYS, since 1998. We're getting a better understanding of saturated fatty acids and its functionalities on today's edition. Professor Legrand, tell us, I think one of the reasons that we have this perception of good versus bad fats is because there's been strong associations with disease, or it being said to be disease-causing. Tell us more about this and what we need to maybe re-understand about this.
So historically, after the Second World War, people ate more fat, in fact. And they ate fat because aromas are in fat. But it gives taste to food, obviously. And the cardiovascular diseases increase at this time. And researchers were saying, so the risk factors are too much fat and too much saturated fat. That was right, but too simple, and this has been overemphasized during decades because the first hypothesis has never been confirmed as a homogeneous group for saturated fats, and data are now accumulating showing that only the excess could provoke cardiovascular disease, but there is a right place and upper limit to eat saturated fats, because if you don't eat them, you will make them anyway. And so
yes. So you'd rather consume them in the right amounts than generate them on your own? Would it be better to consume saturated fats rather than to have the body generate them? Is there more quantities?
Maybe not, but if you slow down all the fat from the diet, that will be worse, because you will get only saturated from the carbohydrates you transform. So it's more likely to keep balanced diet, which includes fats, polyunsaturated fats first, and saturated fats as well.
Absolutely.
And so in the historically, we now move to consider the group of saturates as not homogeneous, and saying so. In fact, it's not bad or good. So it's not bad for saturated fatty acids, but the approach is which saturated fatty acids. There are some subgroups in saturated which has no problem with cardiovascular disease and never had any problem, but it was simplified, too much simplified, and some of them maintains a deleterious aspect, and it's mainly palmitic acid.
Okay, let's talk about that. Which are the subcategories, if I can, within